Welcome back. We're talking about Yemen's future following the fall of the country's pro-Western government. Joining us from London is Abubakr al-Shamahi. He covers Yemen for various publications, including Al-Arabi Al-Jadid English. And with us here in Washington is Stephen Seche. Among his many assignments during 3 decades with the United States Foreign Service, he served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs and U.S. Ambassador to Yemen. Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Anand.
Ambassador, we just heard Senator McCain there talking about the growing influence of Iran in this particular part of the world. Does he have a point with the fall of the pro-Western government in Yemen now that there could be other forces that may be more, that may be supported by Iran?
I think he has a point. I'd be careful not to overstate the point. Certainly Iran has influence, probably substantial influence with the Houthis, but I don't know if they have control over the Houthis. They are a nationalist movement. They are all Yemenis. They have grown up there. They have long, deep ties into Yemen. So certainly influence, but is it decisive? I'm not convinced that's the case.
So as you say, the Iranian, well, I guess, relationship with the Houthis is tenuous at best.
I think it's probably better than tenuous. The Iranians have provided support, material support to the Houthis, weapons. We firmly believe in 2013, a large shipment that was seized in January of that year was almost certainly bound for the Houthis. Probably provided financial support for the Houthis as well. So there is a long line of items and material assistance as well as influence that the Iranians have exercised in Yemen with the Houthis.
All right, Abu Bakr, how would you characterize the situation in Yemen right now?
Chaos, to put it lightly. Right now we have a situation where there's no president, there's no government, there's no state, there's no security, there's no army, and I could go on. And what we do have is an armed militia who've taken over the capital, and the provinces, or numerous provinces, have said that they're not agreeing with that, and that they will not accept that. So it's a country effectively in disarray, and uncertainty abounds as to what comes next, and that really does depend on the next few days, the next few weeks, and if any deal can be hashed out between the various parties involved.
Ambassador, I would imagine that the diplomats here in Washington, the specialists at the State Department and the White House would be looking at developments there with some degree of alarm. What are the options open to them right now? And would one of those options include perhaps talking to Iran?
I certainly hope that's one of the options that you're looking at. I think at this point we should be talking to almost everyone who can exercise influence in Yemen in regards to an outcome that we can all find to be constructive and positive in some respects. So yes, we have to talk to Iran, we have to talk to Saudi Arabia, we have to talk to the Houthis themselves and other players internally who can help this come to an end.
Abu Bakr, one of the concerns that's been expressed here in Washington, we've heard it among analysts, is that the fall of Yemen's pro-Western government, if I could put it that way, makes the country vulnerable to what's been termed extreme influences. Do you share that concern, and is that likely?
Well, I think if we're talking about the breakdown of state structures and state security and things like that, to be honest, the state hasn't been particularly strong over the last few years, and even over the last few decades, the idea that the central state, the state in Sana'a, had full control over tribal areas or over different provinces of Yemen was inaccurate. And I mean, what we're seeing and what we have seen over the past week or so has been local authorities, so local tribes, local regional councils, even cities like Taz, taking control and taking the affairs of their local areas into their own hands and providing security for the people in their areas. So on that front, no. However, on the other side of things is that the emergence of the Houthis, and despite me not wanting to go into the kind of sectarian and the sectarian element of all this, but the representation of the Houthis as a Shia group means that organizations like al-Qaeda can present themselves as the defenders of Sunnis in Yemen. And despite this, for me anyway, not being a Sunni-Shia clash that's going on in Yemen, or shouldn't be overtly seen as one, al-Qaeda can prey on that assumption that may be had on the part of at least some Yemenis.
Okay, Abu Bakr, let me stay with you for a moment there. What exactly do the Houthis want? Do they want a large degree of autonomy or perhaps independence in the northern part of the country, or are they looking for something bigger here?
I think, as you say, autonomy in their areas of the country. The issue is that the Houthis know they can't control the whole of the country for various regional, as I've already mentioned, sectarian reasons. And so their ideal scenario is to have some sort of government, it was Hadi, to be the facade and to take on the role of being the government to the people, handling or being the kind of, if there's any problems in the country, they can put the blame on the other side. The problem for the Houthis now is that Hadi's resigned, they have no plan B, and they're not quite sure what to do. I think, a lot of people have said they seem to have been making it up as they went along. When they went into Sana'a, they didn't expect to actually take Sana'a fully or as quickly as they did. Now they're essentially trying to figure out if they can make a deal with Southerners, if they can make a deal with, or if they can carry on in their alliance with, or it looks like the former president Ali Abdullah Saleh, and whether they'll be able to, as you said, kind of integrate with the states, integrate with the army as well, and be the power behind the throne, so to speak.
Ambassador, how do you see the political dynamics unfolding there?
I think Abubakr has summarized it quite clearly, and I think that the Houthis have never really clearly stated their goals here. They keep talking in very high-minded rhetoric about the need for reform and ending corruption, but nothing they've done has really moved in the direction of resolving any of those issues. And so this very heavy muscular takeover of the government, all the ministries, the reins of authority, really undermines the credibility of their arguments. So I suspect that they may well be in a situation where they have a lot more control suddenly than they really expected to have. And with the ease with which they did move into Sana'a, the ease with which they moved south into areas they've never had a presence before, and are now coming into very close quarters with al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and their Sunni tribes there are also quite nervous. So there is this growing authority of AQAP saying we can defend you from these Houthi invaders, and that is a very worrisome undercurrent in this entire situation.
Right. And Abubakr, we seem to have seen this before. I mean, there were anti-Houthi demonstrations, which we've seen over the past few days, but they're very similar to those demonstrations in 2011, aren't they, which overthrew the government of Ali Abdullah Saleh?
Well, there are definitely similarities between the start of the protest movement in 2011, which was, these initial small protests that came out around Sana'a University, around that area, and then because of crackdowns on the part of the authorities, so at the time it was Saleh and now it's effectively the Houthis, those protests grew and grew. And that's what we're seeing now. The first few days, the numbers were negligible when the Houthis first moved into Sana'a in September. Now the numbers are growing and growing, and that's on the back of, as I said, kind of a crackdown from the authorities. The problem is, though, and for the protest movement is, have they learned from the mistakes of 2011? And those were numerous. The involvement of political parties who were able to kind of take control of the protest movement. Also, the lack of a concrete plan for where the country was going and where their protest movement was going. And it remains to be seen whether the current protest movement, the anti-Houthi protest movement, does have a plan of action, or whether it's simply to go out onto the street to show their opposition to the Houthis.
Ambassador, why is Yemen so important strategically to the United States?
I think there's a number of reasons for that, and certainly the presence of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is one very clear concern of ours. They have already launched 2 unsuccessful attacks from Yemen against the United States. One failed in 2009 by just pure luck, and the other failed in 2010 because of good intelligence cooperation with the Saudis. But they are intent upon expanding their reach, upon demonstrating they can be lethal, and they are, at a distance, so that's a concern. Certainly their proximity to Saudi Arabia, arguably our most important Gulf ally and regional ally, is also worrisome, as is the position astride the important sea lanes that feed from the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden.
Right. Some of the reports we're hearing here in Washington is that the administration here was taken a little bit by surprise by developments in Yemen. I want you to take a listen to what the Democrat Senator from California, Dianne Feinstein, had to say, and then I have a question. Let's watch this.
I think our intelligence with respect to what's going to happen in many of these countries is weak. Whether it's because we do not have adequate human intelligence or not, I don't know. I do think we need some special operations in these countries on the ground, more than just advisors.
Was that an intelligence failure on the part of the United States? And she makes the point that we need more than just advisors. What does that mean? Boots on the ground?
I don't think boots on the ground is a reasonable possibility in Yemen. It would be really counterproductive. It would create a huge blowback against the United States. We don't need that, and it wouldn't really be constructively received or able to do much in any case. A failure of intelligence, I'm not sure. The Yemenis themselves, I think, were caught a little bit flat-footed by the fact that the Houthis moved so quickly into their capital. So we depend heavily on our partners in cases like this, where our presence is relatively small by virtue of the security concerns we have. The embassy's been drawn down over time, not a lot of personnel on the ground, so we have good people there, but we also have to have a heavy dependence on the intelligence services of the host country, in this case, those of the Yemeni government.
Abubakr, Saudi Arabia, the big powerful neighbor to Yemen, has ceased all aid to Yemen. What is that doing? What kind of effect is that having? And does that really reduce Saudi Arabia's leverage in influencing events in Yemen?
I think the Yemeni government has effectively, over the last few years, been bailed out by the Saudis continuously, and you know, it's a severe problem for the Yemeni government if that money isn't flowing into the coffers anymore. When you look at the oil fields and the gas fields in Shabwa and in Hadramaut and in Marib, the production's going down, or you know, if not ceased in those areas. So where the money's going to come from, that's the real question now, and that's the question the Houthis have to ask themselves as well, if they're now responsible for taking control of the country. With regards to Saudi Arabia and the leverage they have in the country, I think over the past few years, that has decreased slightly, but they still have important leverage with the tribes. So just because they're not providing the state government with money doesn't mean they're not providing the tribes, the numerous tribes and tribal sheikhs in Yemen with money, which they've done for decades upon decades. The Saudis, with regards to the Houthis, whilst you know it's not an ideal situation for them to have the Houthis next door controlling the border, it's not the end of the world. And compared to, say, the Muslim Brotherhood or al-Qaeda, which would be a disaster for the Saudis, the Houthis present for them a better ruler or power on the other side of the border.
Ambassador, the one other concern for the United States must be al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, a very active al-Qaeda branch which is in Yemen. The United States is continuing with its drone strikes. The fall of the government must be a setback then.
It's got to be seen with a lot of concern. I think that the reports of a drone strike on Monday against al-Qaeda operatives was a signal sent by Washington that we are not going to step away from this fight. This is important to us strategically, and we have to maintain a presence and a determination to make sure al-Qaeda does not grow stronger. And again, the ability to export its violence to Europe or to the United States is clearly a keen interest of our government. So, but without a partner, without a government, now there are still some networks of security agencies and intelligence services in Yemen we can work with, even absent a president. But that can't go on indefinitely, and we have to see how this resolves itself and hope that as it does, the next leader will be willing to continue the work that President Hadi had done with us.
Okay, gentlemen, that's where we're going to have to leave it. Time has caught up with us.